I knew something was wrong the moment she called me Bobby. Not Bob, not Robert, just Bobby. Like I was some eager intern who brought her coffee and said yes ma'am to everything. Jessica Sterling said it with that smug smile consultants wear like expensive cologne. Cheap, flashy, and designed to cover up incompetence. Bobby, can I count on you to streamline compliance for our acquisition pitch? She asked, already turning away before I could answer. I stared at the back of her head, imagining all the things I wanted to say, starting with my 15 years of experience and ending with Clause 12b7. But I didn't, because I was the professional in the room. I always had been. My name is Robert Caldwell, I'm 47 years old, and I used to be Chief Risk Officer at Apex Financial Solutions. Used to be, because people like Jessica don't understand what guys like me actually do. They think we're just paper pushers who slow things down. They don't get that we're the ones keeping everyone out of federal prison. Jessica had arrived 6 months earlier from McKinsey, armed with an MBA and zero understanding of what happens when you ignore banking regulations. Fresh-faced at 31, she'd spent her career telling established companies how to disrupt themselves without ever facing the consequences when disruption goes wrong. She looked at our 15-year track record of regulatory compliance like it was some quaint museum exhibit. 15 years of spotless audits, zero regulatory violations, and a compliance framework I built from scratch after the 2008 mess. Not that anyone bothered to say thanks. As long as the regulators didn't come knocking, I was invisible, fine by me. Meant I could work in peace, building risk models at midnight and writing policies that actually protected people. I wore the same 3 suits in rotation, kept protein bars in my desk drawer, and had exactly 2 friends at work. Neither had ever seen me lose my cool. I was steady power, and I liked it that way. Navy taught me that. Maintain your bearing under pressure, know your systems inside out, and always have a backup plan. But everything started going sideways when Jessica arrived as VP of Digital Strategy and Innovation, whatever that meant. She walked into our Monday strategy session like someone who'd never met a regulation she couldn't optimize away, grinning too hard and throwing around words like synergy and compliance light. I watched her fumble through a PowerPoint called The Future of Finance, complete with animated charts and stock photos of diverse people high-fiving over whiteboards. The whole presentation screamed, "I learned banking from TED Talks." Then she turned to me. "Bobby," she said, actually pointing at me, "you'll be our regulatory guardian angel, right?" She winked. I took a slow sip of my coffee and said nothing. My silence must have rattled her because she added, "We'll need you to fast-track the compliance checklist so we can get buy-in from Colorado Banking Group by end of week. It's mostly box checking anyway, right?" I kept my face neutral, but something snapped inside me like a dry twig. That checklist was the only thing standing between us and a $50 million FINRA fine if someone skipped mandatory protocols. But sure, box checking. I didn't argue. Not yet. I just nodded and wrote down every word she said in a legal pad I would later label Jessica's greatest hits. I kept copies in my desk, my bag, and at home. Navy habit. Document everything, especially when dealing with people who don't know what they don't know. The thing with people like Jessica is they think being loud equals being right. They perform leadership like community theater actors doing Shakespeare. Overacted, under-researched, and allergic to feedback. Within a week, she had rescheduled 3 compliance reviews, consolidated 2 risk workflows into a single useless slide, and asked if we could auto-generate audit trails using ChatGPT. She called my documentation style dense, and asked if I could convert protocols into infographic form. I told her compliance wasn't a coloring book. She didn't laugh. But the part that made my eye twitch was when she wanted to present our cloud infrastructure system, the system I spent 3 years designing after studying every banking regulation from Dodd-Frank to Basel III, as a selling point to Colorado Banking Group in a demo scheduled 2 weeks earlier than planned. A $20 million acquisition depended on that demo. Jessica thought skipping the final SOC2 audit was an acceptable risk. I told her it wasn't. We were talking about transferring customer financial data across state lines without proper authorization frameworks, the kind of mistake that gets your banking license revoked. She leaned across the conference table, tilted her head like a restaurant manager about to deny a discount, and said, "Robert, I need team players, not traffic cops." I stared at her, long and flat. "I'm the one who makes sure your team doesn't drive off a regulatory cliff." She smirked. Watch your tone. Just like that, I realized something bone deep. Jessica had no clue what I actually did. She saw compliance as some abstract concept you could MBA your way around, not the difference between staying in business and explaining to federal regulators why you thought banking law was optional. That was my first mistake, thinking she'd eventually figure it out. My second mistake was underestimating how dangerous someone could be when they're completely confident in their complete ignorance. But Jessica made a bigger mistake. She forgot that quiet doesn't mean weak, and methodical doesn't mean slow. She was about to learn the difference. 3 days after the guardian angel comment, I found myself trapped in a windowless conference room that smelled like leftover sandwiches and ego. The meeting invite said acquisition readiness checkpoint, but what it really was a public ceremony where Jessica got to unload her buzzwords like they were gospel. She paced in front of the whiteboard with a marker in one hand and her confidence in the other, rambling about velocity pivots and streamlined onboarding. No agenda, no documentation, just vibes. The kind of meeting that happens when someone confuses motion with progress. I waited until she paused between acronyms and said as calmly as I could, "Demo version of the cloud infrastructure hasn't cleared SOC 2 audit. We're also missing dual authorization in the access matrix." Jessica blinked. "Okay. And?" I didn't flinch. "And Clause 12b7 hasn't been executed. Technically, we can't transfer platform ownership to the buyer without legal exposure." Silence. Someone coughed. I could feel 20 eyeballs doing the boardroom shuffle, looking anywhere but at us. These were smart people who understood exactly what I was saying, but nobody wanted to be the one to tell the emperor about her wardrobe situation. Jessica gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Robert, I get that compliance is your thing. It's not a thing. It's federal law." She cut me off with a hand wave. "We can't let process get in the way of progress. You're being..." She trailed off, then snapped her fingers like she'd solved a puzzle. "You're being negative. Let's not kill momentum." Negative. Like pointing out landmines on a battlefield made me the problem. I'd heard this before, in the Navy, from officers who thought regulations were suggestions and safety protocols were for other people, usually right before something exploded. I said nothing after that, just sat still, pen in hand, watching her dig deeper into her own ignorance. By the end of the meeting, she had reassigned my responsibilities to a fresh MBA named Marcus Webb, who once asked if encryption meant turning files into PDFs. My inbox pinged 5 minutes later. Subject line, "Immediate next steps." Body full of bullet points that read like a suicide note. Marcus would handle compliance optimization. Legal would streamline documentation processes. And I would focus on knowledge transfer activities until transition completion. Corporate speak for clean out your desk. By noon, HR had scheduled a behavioral review meeting. I knew what that meant. In 15 years, I'd seen this dance before. When leadership wants you gone but can't fire you for performance, they manufacture a personality problem. When I walked into HR, I was met by Kevin Hayes, our director. Nervous guy, sweating under a jacket he clearly bought at Men's Warehouse. He avoided eye contact while reading from his laptop like he was delivering someone else's eulogy. "It says here you were aggressive in tone and created a hostile environment during today's meeting." I stared at him. "Did you read the transcript?" He cleared his throat. There wasn't one. Of course not. Jessica didn't want receipts, just headlines. I didn't argue. Arguing in HR is like bringing a fire extinguisher to a house that's already ash. Kevin was just following orders from someone who'd already made up her mind. What hit me hardest wasn't the accusation. It was realizing that Jessica truly didn't know what I did. Not figuratively, literally. This woman who now held decision-making authority had zero idea what systems governed our data, who maintained the protocols, or what the legal implications were for what she was pushing. She saw my job the way tourists see air traffic control, some mysterious process that happens in the background while they focus on their destination. Never mind that one mistake brings everything crashing down. That was the moment the fear left me, and the math began. I walked back to my office, bypassed the meeting requests piling in my inbox, and opened the locked drawer where I kept the originals. The originals of everything. Access logs, vendor agreements, backup credentials. One thick binder labeled with my name and 3 red tabs. It wasn't a trophy, it was insurance with teeth. Inside were signed clauses that required me personally to authorize transfer of system rights. Without my signature, Colorado Banking Group would be buying a car with no title. Pretty, polished, but legally undrivable. I hadn't built it that way by accident. 6 years ago, I watched our old CTO get scapegoated during a failed migration. Nobody had his back when the board needed someone to blame. I learned then, if you want to be invisible, be indispensable. But if they force you out, make sure the door they shove you through is holding up the roof. Clause 12b7 was my masterpiece. Buried in subsection C of the Platform Transfer Agreement, written in plain English that any lawyer could understand, but most executives would skip over. Effective change of control requires written authorization from the original system architect, Robert Caldwell, Chief Risk Officer, not a compliance officer, not designated personnel. Me, specifically. I began emailing myself backups, slowly, carefully, 1 file per hour, nothing traceable, nothing loud. Just insurance. The kind of preparation the Navy taught me. Hope for the best, plan for the worst, and always have an exit strategy. Jessica had underestimated me the way people underestimate infrastructure. You don't notice the power grid until the lights go out. You don't think about water treatment until the tap runs dry. And you don't appreciate compliance until federal regulators are standing in your lobby with handcuffs. She'd confused quiet for weak, methodical for slow, and Robert for replaceable. Outside my window, Denver's skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in those glass towers, other companies were making the same mistake, promoting the loud over the competent, the flashy over the foundational. But this wasn't about other companies. This was about Jessica Sterling learning that some people, when pushed, don't just push back. They pull the foundation out from under you. They called me in on a Thursday. Not even the dignity of a Friday afternoon mercy kill. Just a limp Outlook invite titled Follow-Up Chat. Dropped between 2 meetings about data retention policies they'd now royally screw up without me. When I entered the room, Jessica was already there. No smile, no laptop, just that same condescending lean-back posture like she was about to offer me a coupon for a colonoscopy. Across from her sat Kevin from HR, hands clenched around a legal pad like it might shield him from what was coming. "Robert," Jessica began, "thank you for coming. We want to start by saying we appreciate all your past contributions." "Just say it," I said, sitting down without being asked. She exchanged a glance with Kevin like I'd broken protocol. "We've received multiple reports that your communication style has created a hostile work environment. After reviewing these concerns, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately, just like that. No mention of specific incidents, no examples, no legal counsel present. Not even a courtesy performance review to soften the blow. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was sloppy." And sloppy from a woman obsessed with optics told me one thing. This wasn't about performance. This was about control. I'd embarrassed her in front of the team. I'd told the truth. And in her world, truth was an act of aggression. "Will there be an exit interview?" I asked. Kevin shifted. "Not in this case. Of course not. Exit interviews leave paper trails, and paper trails have a way of surfacing during wrongful termination lawsuits." Jessica stood and held out a plain white envelope. "Your severance package is included. We've also deactivated your system access, and security will escort me out," I finished. Naturally, I didn't raise my voice, didn't flip the table or knock over her ergonomic chair like she probably expected. I just stood, straightened my tie, and took the envelope. She looked relieved. That was her first mistake, because I wasn't planning a scene. I was executing a plan. Back in my office, my real office, the one I'd held for 15 years while people like her rotated through buzzword-heavy titles like seasonal fashion, I pulled open the second drawer. Inside was the thick navy binder. No stickers, no flair, just a white label with black letters. R. Caldwell, Legal Triggers and Control Docs. I placed it squarely in the center of my desk, facing the door. Flipped it open just enough for the first tab to peek out. Change of control clauses. Original authorizations required. Then I took a breath and walked out. No dramatic pause, no farewell speech. Just a firm click as the door shut behind me. The security guard met me at the elevators. Young guy, looked genuinely sorry. "You okay, Mr. Caldwell?" "I will be," I said. Outside, the Denver air carried the smell of snow from the mountains, But that afternoon it also carried the scent of freedom. Not the sunshine kind, the cold, calculated kind you get when someone mistakes your professionalism for weakness. I didn't go home. I went to the coffee shop across the street, ordered black coffee, and opened my phone. I had time now, time to put things in motion. I sent one message to Ben Torres, a senior engineer who still owed me for covering his mistakes during a vendor audit last year. I didn't say much, just check the binder on my desk, pay attention to tab 2. Then I turned my phone off and sat there for an hour watching my old building like it was theater, because it was. And the curtain was just starting to rise. The first crack showed up exactly 5 business days later. A QA analyst flagged a missing hash in the data export logs. Tiny thing, one inconsistent string in a batch of validation files that were supposed to be airtight before demo day. I used to call those canary errors. Not fatal by themselves, but loud enough to warn you the mine was filling with gas. Without me there to translate the alarm, the canary just choked and died on someone's JIRA ticket. Jessica's replacement for me was Marcus Webb, fresh off a year doing governance ops at a fintech startup that sold artisanal pet insurance. He introduced himself in Slack as a compliance ninja and immediately set about proving why ninjas make terrible accountants. His first act was deleting half my dashboards because they had too many fields. When QA pinged him about the hash issue, he responded with a thumbs up emoji and, "Let's not overthink this. They were already over the cliff. They just hadn't looked down yet." By week 2, 3 more issues surfaced. Mismatched timestamps on encryption keys I'd personally embedded with fallback protocols, a data migration report that got auto-flagged because it failed 2-factor validation. Marcus dismissed both as legacy paranoia. When a junior engineer asked during stand-up, "Didn't Robert usually review these?" Jessica laughed. Not a chuckle. A full theatrical laugh that made the poor guy look like he'd confessed to using Internet Explorer. "Robert's obsession with redundancy was why we moved so slowly," she said. "This is the new era. We're agile now." Agile. She kept using that word like ignoring federal banking regulations was just an optional yoga pose. What she meant was reckless but fast. Code got pushed without peer review. Vendor contracts were signed using templates pulled from Google Docs. At least one still had another company's name watermarked in the footer. Ben kept feeding me intelligence. Each message felt like watching a slow-motion train wreck through a telescope. Legal asked Marcus if he had the compliance binder. He said, "Oh, I think Jessica recycled it." New buyer contracts still list R. Caldwell as primary authorization contact. Marcus just asked how to retro-sign a PDF. Meanwhile, inside the building, they were polishing the pig for its big debut. Presentation decks got last-minute animations. Someone installed a countdown timer in the break room, T- demo day. Nobody was asking the right questions. Not because they trusted Jessica, but because the energy was so manic, nobody wanted to be the pin that popped the balloon. Across the street, I watched it all unfold like a masterclass in institutional destruction, and smiled. The conference room was staged like a crime scene with too many witnesses. Bottled water lined the credenza. A whiteboard displayed partnership in 3 colors. The flat screen showed our logo pulsing in a slideshow loop, like a heartbeat monitor for a dying patient. Colorado Banking Group's team arrived precisely on time. 4 sharp-suited professionals from a firm known for turning acquisitions into profit margins. Their lead auditor, Patricia Hernandez, had steel gray hair and a voice that never changed tempo. She introduced herself with a handshake that made Jessica visibly wince. Jessica tried her usual routine. "We're super excited about the synergy here. This is going to be a major win-win." Hernandez didn't blink. "Let's begin with the system validation walkthrough." Jessica kicked off the demo with fake-it-till-you-make-it energy, clicking through dashboards with rehearsed flair. For exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds, it almost worked. The presentation flowed, numbers aligned, and Marcus nodded from the sidelines like he understood what was happening. Then came the live data validation. The demo froze, cursor spinning, back-end calls stalling. An entire API segment failed to load, not lagging, dead. The screen flickered once and displayed an error message that might as well have been written in Sanskrit for all the good it did them. Someone from our side started frantically typing. Marcus was sweating through his shirt, jabbing at his phone like it might contain the solution. Jessica leaned forward, frowning in performative concern. "Must be server latency," she announced confidently. We've been optimizing the environment for peak performance. But the room had changed. Buyers stopped nodding. Laptops opened. Hernandez tapped once on her keyboard and a PDF appeared on her screen. "I'd like to see the compliance documentation," she said with the tone of someone who'd found exactly what she was looking for. Specifically, the authorization history for this platform and the legal basis for transfer of ownership. Everyone turned to Legal. Legal turned to Marcus. Marcus opened the conference room cabinet, pulled out my binder. Someone had finally fished it from storage after Ben quietly reminded them that all digital backups were mysteriously experiencing login issues, and placed it on the table like it was just another stapled report. The irony made me laugh out loud in the coffee shop across the street. Nobody heard it but me. Hernandez opened the binder with the deliberate care of a surgeon making the first incision. Flip, flip, pause. Her eyebrow arched in a way that suggested she'd found exactly what she was looking for. Clause 12b7, she said flatly. Effective change of control requires named officer consent. She turned the binder slightly for her team to see. Her finger tapped the signature line with the precision of a judge's gavel. It was blank. Under the line, printed in black Arial, Robert Caldwell, Chief Risk Officer, Original System Architect. Hernandez looked up slowly. "Where is Mr. Caldwell?" Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. "He's no longer with the company." Hernandez nodded once, the way doctors nod when delivering terminal diagnoses. "Then who authorized this transfer?" Jessica opened her mouth again, looked at Legal like they might throw her a life preserver. Legal stared back with the hollow eyes of people watching their careers dissolve in real time. Hernandez wasn't done. This clause states that without explicit written consent from the named officer, no data system covered under Appendix C may be transferred, accessed, or demonstrated for commercial intent. She paused, letting that sink in. That includes what just occurred. The room went still. Even the slideshow paused mid-fade between corporate slogans. Jessica tried to rally one last time. We assumed it was standard language, boilerplate. "Then you didn't read it," Hernandez said. No inflection, no emotion. Just professional judgment, pure and undiluted. Marcus stepped back 1 inch, noticeable to everyone. Hernandez closed the binder with a sound like a coffin lid. "I'm pausing this session immediately. Our counsel will review whether this demonstration constitutes breach of non-disclosure and whether the attempted transfer was conducted in bad faith." She stood. Her team stood with her, chairs scraping like gravestones across marble. "You'll be hearing from our legal department." And then they walked out. No handshakes, no pleasantries, no, "We'll be in touch." Just suits filing out of a room that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. By the next morning, the demo room was stripped bare. The countdown timer went dark at 6:47 a.m., probably after someone realized nobody wanted to count down to their own autopsy. The deal was off. Officially, Colorado Banking Group postponed indefinitely for internal review, which in corporate speak means we saw the iceberg and we're not getting on this Titanic. By noon, the emails started flying. Investor demands for explanations. Board members who'd been kept in the dark about my departure and the legal implications. One leaked message read, "Why did nobody inform us the system was legally non-transferable post-Caldwell?" Because, dear board members, nobody had bothered to ask. Jessica was called upstairs at 2:15 p.m. By 4:30, her badge was deactivated. Security escorted her through the lobby while she tried explaining something to the guard about miscommunications and process gaps. Someone posted in the company's Slack. Must be server latency, right? 6 months later, I closed my laptop at a clean desk facing the Colorado Rockies. The nameplate read, Robert Caldwell, Senior Vice President, Risk Management. The salary was $180K more than my old position. The respect was genuine, and the coffee was actually decent. On my screen, a new compliance framework blinked. Cursor ready. All system transfers must be authorized in writing by designated officers. No exceptions, no assumptions, no shortcuts. I saved the file, locked it, and leaned back in my chair. No champagne, no celebration. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching competence defeat arrogance through the simple application of consequences. Jessica had learned something valuable about the difference between disruption and destruction. The $20 million lesson. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the natural consequences of underestimating the people who actually know what they're doing. The quiet ones, the methodical ones, the ones who read the fine print, the ones who write it. 15 years building that system, and it did exactly what I designed it to do. Protect the company from its own worst decisions. Jessica learned that some foundations can't be disrupted, only respected.